The 200th anniversary of Central's founding, or the successful completion of our Restore campaign, but we're celebrating the dramatic work of renewal that God has wrought within our congregation over the last 15 years. When people first hear the story of Central, it's usually a little bit too good to be true. They can't quite believe it. And they'll ask me, well, how did this happen? How did this church that was dead come back to life? And I always say, well, that's easy. It's because of Jesus. You can get everything else right, but if you're not focused on Jesus, then nothing else matters. And the church recentered its focus on Jesus, and that's when everything began to change. So if you take your eyes off of Jesus, you're sunk. If you fix your eyes on Jesus, well, then things begin to move, and that's what we've seen. And as we look back over the last 15 years, we can see the fingerprints of God's work. He rose up leaders like Howard and Doug to take the charge. He rose up people like Seth and Amber to recruit a whole assembly of musicians and singers to lead us in worship. God provided us with incredibly thoughtful entrepreneurial leaders who helped us make smart decisions. God provided us with wise and courageous friends who gave us just the right advice about how to navigate the changing cultural terrain that we find ourselves in. He provided us with an incredibly gifted and passionate staff that were willing to do whatever it takes in order to implement and to execute the church's vision. And on a personal note, I can say that the elders and the trustees of our church took exceedingly good care of me and Ashley and our family, which has buoyed us in the midst of all the stresses and the strains of ministry in New York City, which, let me just tell you, is not easy. So I'm incredibly grateful to our leaders who have provided so much ongoing encouragement and support to us. And the end result is that, by God's grace, Central has become a place where people from all different backgrounds and walks of life can discover the gospel for themselves and experience its transformative power. It's become a place where people can find Christian community, cross-generational friendships, sometimes even marriage. And it's been a place where people can find their unique role in God's mission in New York City and beyond. And so tonight, on this, the 200th anniversary of our church, we have prepared an incredibly special video for you that captures the transformative impact that Central has had on many of your lives. So before we show this video, let me just say that we purposely put nimble, sprightly people in the corners because we knew that you could quickly pop up and stand in a position where you can see the screen. So if you'd like to take a moment to do so, show us how nimble and sprightly you can be.
The number of people who attended a Sunday service today at 11 o'clock, which was the only service at the time, the number of people who attended was down to about 25 or 30 people at the most. The only service at the time. And we never saw more than that, even on Christmas time. Was down to about 25 or 30 people at the most. And we never saw more than that, even on Christmas time. The Saturday morning Bible study was something that was a new idea. So it was nice that the Saturday morning Bible study we had a small group and we talked about different things. And so I happened to be seated next to Trevor. I'd never met him before. We had a small group and we talked about different things. When it became time for Trevor to speak, I was so impressed with him. I was sitting back in my chair and wondering, who is this man and why? I'd like to get to know him better. I had been married before. I had lost my wife early on in our marriage, and we never had any children. But I sat back and thought, my God, if this young man had been my son, I'd have been very, very pleased and very proud to hear him speaking the way he was. And I had met Trevor on several occasions afterwards, and we became good friends.
He spoke with a self-confidence, a peace, and a kind of knowing character that even though he was he was the oldest person there that morning by a pretty wide margin. He seemed, in that moment, much more relatable, actually, than a lot of the other folks. That was a timeless moment for me because it was so important for me developing, one of the greatest friendships I've ever had in my entire life. Because we had a familial bond, I treated Nils the way that anyone would treat their grandfather. All right, I'm in a relationship with a new woman, and I think she's a good one, so I'm gonna let Nils meet her.
We met at our community group. It was meeting in the Upper East Side. I think at that point you were 24 or 25 years old. And what does a young single man in New York City, I was 28 at the time, know about, serious relationships? So I had kind of taken it a bit lightly. But it wasn't until I met Nils and seen that there is a relationship with this 89-year-old gentleman, and such a close one at that. They were beyond friends. They were, at that time, to me, almost brothers. And I just thought that was incredibly weird, but also really interesting. And so if someone could be so be interested in each other in that way, there has to be more depth. It seemed like I needed to pass muster through Nils, but Trevor passed muster through Nils for me. So I guess we're married because of Nils. I had not grown up with any grandparents. So whether Nils liked it or not, at some point I just said, "You're my grandfather." And when he did ask us to be his grandchildren, I mean, that was just an incredibly moving moment, because you can be, through the church, through Christ, be family in love, not just by blood.
And the way we interact with Nils is unconventional in society, but it is something I saw replicated at this church many times. Not just with us. Some of them are just known around the church who live lives in these very countercultural ways where they say, you are my brother, you are my sister, you are my grandfather, you're my grandmother, I'm going to treat you like that. That means hospital visits. It means holidays and maybe the occasional holiday argument. But it does mean living life in a radically different way and creating, what only the bonds of the cross and the church can do for us. And people notice. That's the crazy part about this. Friends in my network who were atheists said, "You have something unique and special there."
I can remember the first Sunday that I came, the end of service every Sunday, the choir sings the Lord's Prayer, which of course I know the Lord's Prayer, but I had never heard it sung before until that Sunday. At that final note, it was literally like a wash of sound that flew over me, and I was like, whoa. And so that was a very powerful draw for me personally as a musician to continue engaging with this church and to find out more about the music ministry and then the various other ways that Central is engaging with New York City. End of 2015, beginning of 2016, Jason sent an email that just said, "Hey, we're looking for someone to join the staff. Do you know anybody who might be interested?" And I responded, me? Ultimately, they not only hired me, but 5 people in total working part-time. We were all 20-somethings at the time, and it really felt like a startup because it was all of us hunched together in that tiny 4th floor office, and it was all hands on deck. Who's sending out the email this week? Who's fielding phone calls? Who's creating the bulletin and proofing it and printing it and occasionally folding it by hand with a spoon because our finisher wasn't working? It was weird because there would be times where I was like, I have absolutely nothing left to give, but also just being part of that community and working with these people was also an energizing experience as well. So it was never I cannot walk into this building, but it was more so all right, team, let's figure out how to make this work and see you on the other side. 2018, 2019, things began to pick up career-wise for me in music and performance, and so started transitioning away. And then, thank you, pandemic, all of what I was working on went down the drain. And they were looking again for a full-time office manager, which was a lot of the same role that I was doing before, but they now had a communications manager and another operations director and whatnot. So, as before, it was all of these people working part-time doing all of the ministries. In 2021, all of those roles had been separated out into different people, and people had a clear sense of, this is what my task and service on staff is for Central. All of the questions of process and how do we do this again and who does this again had been streamlined and put in documents and written out, and there had been a very intentional move towards systematizing. And so I think that one just created a much more efficient work environment, but also allowed us to do so much in terms of gospel ministry and outreach and everything that we're doing, particularly as a growing congregation.
I wanted to work in finance and I wanted it to be in Manhattan. So I came and worked for the entire summer after my third year of school. Started attending Central every Sunday, and I would typically go alone, and that at the time didn't bother me. I remember first being struck that summer by the very forward focus on the gospel every single Sunday, which I don't want to feel discouraged by that being a surprise. I think it's also just a beautiful thing that Central does really well. My church that I had grown up in didn't do communion every single Sunday, and so I was struck by the movement that Jason always made from sermon to the table, and very reliably. No matter what topic, if he was preaching on a topic he was discussing, no matter what passage, he could be talking about something that seems so far and removed from Jesus' life, and he would always end at the table drawing it back to the death and the resurrection and hope of Jesus Christ. It always helped me to both take the lesson, whatever was being talked about, and then always leave just being reminded of the simple truth and most powerful truth of all, that Jesus Christ died and rose again, and we get to participate in that. I think it's something that is representative of what we do so well, of this is a place for the gospel at the end of the day. And then when I moved the following year to start full-time, there were different aspects of Central's community and life that I was really excited to get started with. And so I went to the Bowery Mission and volunteered with the Saturday evening service and dinner. It was really powerful to me, and I met a friend there that is still one of my closest friends. We came from very different backgrounds in terms of how we thought about the church and how we approached it. I think a lot of us can look at the church and look at community groups and think that it is full of a lot of people that look the same and think the same, and that there's not room for disagreement or doubt. And I think that is one of the more beautiful things that came out of our combined time together in the same community group and our friendship of just breaking down each other's visions of Christian community. So Lauren has since moved away, which is very sad, and I miss her a lot. But I was really, really encouraged the other day because she texted me that she had gone to a Bible study at her new church. And to me, that was like, whoa, like this was sort of a challenging part for her here. And then the fact that she had built up that muscle and then was seeking after that elsewhere. Like such a beautiful picture of the way that Central is also not just a church for the people that are living in Manhattan or attending regularly, and that it is shaping and changing people that go forth and leave and go elsewhere.
The first time that I brought our new adopted children into Children's Church, they were checked in by Maria Long, who I had helped watch over during Sunday school 8 years prior.
To know that Jason is actively both thinking about and grappling with the current environment and culture and letting that be a part of the gospel-focused sermons that he's given every Sunday is something that is just life-giving.
Central has become so important in my life, and I guess in Trevor and Diane feel the same way about it. It's a root that we hold on to.
When you're in a small church, the participation that you can have is so vital. You literally are the hands and feet of God, and as it grows, being in the diaconate showed just how much more need you have too. So as the church filled my own needs, that's what God has shown me, that as things improve and grow, the need also improves and grows.
That is one of the more beautiful things that Central does incredibly well too, just positioning themselves outwardly to the rest of the world and making this not just a place to come and feel individually, spiritually fulfilled, but creating a place of committed believers that want to see this world redeemed and loved, trying to accomplish the Lord's work.
Well, I'd like to thank Nils and Trevor and Diane. And Jacinth and Sarah for participating in that video. And thank you to Andrew Walker, who's there in the back, our videographer who put that video together for us tonight. I said at the beginning, the story of Central has been a team effort from the very beginning, and truer words have never been spoken. And so I would like everyone who has ever served on the staff of the church, and there's many of you, as Jacinth mentioned, to stand up. If you've ever served as a deacon or an elder or a trustee of the church, please stand up. And if you've ever served as a pastor or the illustrious position as pastor's wife, to stand up. Can we applaud you for your service to the church? Well, you would think that maybe we would be done. But this is the best part. We're just getting started. Not for the evening, but for our plans. When we first dreamed of putting bells back in the bell tower, and we launched our campaign to restore Central, we built our campaign around a verse, 1 Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 8. For not only has the word of the Lord sounded forth from you, but your faith in God has gone forth everywhere, so that we need not say anything. And now that we have put bells back in our tower, with every strike of those bells, we are reminded that our faith is supposed to make a sound. The gospel is supposed to resound from our lives, echoing and reverberating among the people around us and pointing them to the living and true God who renews all things. And from the earliest days of Central's turnaround, we have sought to be a church, therefore, that does not merely exist for itself, but for the good of others, especially those who do not yet believe. And so now that all this work has been accomplished over the last 15 years, all of this hard, strenuous, prayerful work, we now are in a position to be a little cathedral for the city in the ways that we have long envisioned. And that is why I'm so excited to share a new initiative with you tonight, which we are calling Resound Project. Resound is a vision to strengthen churches for a changing world. We live in a changing world. The best way that I could sum it up is to say that the world is a very different place than it was compared to even 20 years ago when I first went to seminary. When I went to seminary, I was trained by some of the best minds in the field and some of the most thoughtful Christian leaders, and yet I was trained for a world that no longer exists. The world has changed in 20 years. Broadly speaking, we could say that we've moved from a society that was positive, perhaps neutral towards Christianity, towards one where it is now negative towards Christianity. And broadly speaking, you could say that the church is struggling to keep up with the pace of change and struggling to know how to navigate the changing cultural landscape as we move deeper and deeper into what you could call a post-Christian environment. Now, on the one hand, this isn't surprising, because every generation has to discern how to embody and extend the gospel in its own day. And as long as the church has existed, the church has had to confront problems as well as possibilities. Eric Gregory reminded us today that the problems and possibilities we face today are really not all that different from those that Augustine faced many, many centuries ago. But I do think it's fair to say that the current social climate does make it especially difficult for the church to live out its calling. If you look around the church today, it seems clear to me that far too many pastors are growing weary and disillusioned. Far too many church leaders are losing sight of the gospel and the kingdom vision that first drew their hearts towards ministry. And far too many Christians, all of us, we're disoriented and we're confused about how to connect the gospel to our everyday lives, to our communities, to our places of work. And in the midst of all this cultural noise, I firmly believe that the clarion call of the gospel, attuned to a new day, is the resounding song that we all need to hear, every last one of us. And so that is what this new initiative is all about. Now, Central knows this challenge firsthand. We've lived through this over the last 15 years. And we believe, therefore, that our story, simply put, positions us to serve. We're simply in a place to serve. Only God could have orchestrated the dramatic story of Central's renewal. No human being could have plotted or planned this out, trust me. And in many ways, Central's story is unique, but we nevertheless feel that it can provide the necessary spark of inspiration to encourage the renewal of other local churches in other places as one more way to strengthen the broader church in our time. Look, Central makes no claims to have any definitive answers to the problems that we face today, but we do believe that the gospel offers a lodestar by which we can navigate. And so, given our immense gratitude to God for what he has wrought in our midst, our pastors, our staff, our elders, our trustees keenly sense a responsibility to do what we can with what we have, to share our experience, to share our resources, to share our relationships, to do whatever we can to be of service to others. Jesus is the one who put it best. To whom much is given, much is required. And we have been given much, and so there's much for us to give. Now, in our view, what this cultural moment requires is not necessarily more churches or larger churches, but stronger churches. We need stronger, more resilient churches to navigate these unusual circumstances. So our approach will focus on three overlapping areas: helping pastors, equipping churches, and engaging the culture. Now, there are a lot of organizations out there today that do wonderful work supporting pastors and their families with the stress of ministry. And there's lots of organizations that equip churches with resources to do ministry better. And there's lots of people out there that are seeking to help others understand and address broad cultural trends and issues. But we believe that what makes Central unique is that we've been able to navigate our way through how all those areas overlap and intersect. And what makes ministry so complicated in our day and in our age is the ways in which all these elements overlap and intersect. And so we believe that the most effective way to have an impact on the broader church moving forward is by addressing all three together: helping pastors and their families, equipping churches and their leaders, and engaging the broader culture. And that's the inspiration behind our logo. These three concentric circles for Resound Project capture our focus on these three overlapping areas, and they also illustrate the outcome that we're seeking to achieve. What do we want to see happen? We want to see the gospel resounding from churches all over the country, echoing and reverberating within their communities and making some positive difference in our world today. So the initiatives that we seek to undertake will prioritize shared learning and strong supportive relationships. The 4 initiatives we'll develop will include creating a library of resources that church leaders across the country will hopefully rely on for guidance and insight, fostering cohorts of pastors, ministry couples, or church leaders that will meet routinely over the course of several years to learn with and from one another, hosting several emerging leaders programs here at Central for seminarians, professionals, and marketplace leaders and students. In some ways, we're already doing this, and now we'll just do it in a more robust and formalized way. And then fourthly, providing coaching and mentoring through a network of veteran ministry leaders. Now, you may be wondering, okay, great, but what does this all have to do with me? So let me give you an image. At some point in time, you've probably heard me repeat the saying that the church is not supposed to be a museum for saints, thank God, but a hospital for sinners. So the church is supposed to be a hospital. Well, in the early days of Central's turnaround, you could say that we function a little bit like a field hospital. We were engaged in a conflict, and we were battling for survival. So we functioned like a field hospital. We did what we could to bandage the wounded and then get them back out there on the field as we continued to march forward. But we eventually found the ground beneath our feet. Things began to stabilize, and we were able to transition from functioning like a field hospital to a community hospital. We were able to put those structures in place. We were able to mature as an organization and move out of that chaotic startup phase. We became a healthier functioning body that can meet the needs of our congregation and our immediate community. But now the next stage in our development, I believe, is to move from being a community hospital to becoming a teaching hospital. And that's really what is energizing this whole vision. And that's the vision that I want to impress upon you tonight. You go to all 3 kinds of hospitals for healing: a field hospital, a community hospital, or a teaching hospital. But a teaching hospital exists not merely to perpetuate its own existence or to benefit its immediate community, but to be a resource to other communities with an eye not only on the present, but also on the future, on future generations. And we believe that that's the position that we at Central are now in. But if we're going to function as a teaching hospital, well, then that means that we all have a role to play. Now, I want you to know that we are actively committed to this project. The pastors, the staff, the elders, the trustees, we are already putting down tracks to make this dream a reality. But you may not immediately notice a change when you show up at church tomorrow, but give it a couple months, and you will see that this vision will take on concrete reality, and this will become something that we are living out together as a community. So you'll be hearing a lot more about this in the coming months, but in terms of what you can do now, we would encourage you, first of all, to pray. Please join us in praying for this effort, that God would continue to renew Central, and then use us to be a source of inspiration and encouragement in the renewing work of other congregations. Secondly, spread the word. Initially, we'll invite people into this work through word of mouth, and so feel free to share what we're thinking, what we're envisioning with people in your world, family, friends, ministry leaders, pastors. And then finally, as always, you can give. New initiatives always need resources, so we invite your financial support. Resound will fall under the oversight of our elders and trustees, and in addition to that, we've already created a small advisory board that may expand over time, but currently that consists of Tom Shannon, our chair, who unfortunately couldn't be with us tonight, but it will also include Lori Reyes, who's with us tonight, along with her husband, Jude, and we're so incredibly thankful for their partnership in this endeavor. It's already been so much fun planning this initiative, and I cannot wait to see what happens when we actually unleash it. In addition to her role as the Director of Communications for Central, Mary Catherine will also play a key role in this initiative because she's an ace. And then I'm also excited to be able to announce for the very first time that the plan from the very start was that we would hire Chris Hildebrand not only to serve as the executive pastor of Central, but also as the executive director of Resound Project. We have prepared a beautiful storybook that outlines our vision for Resound and ways that you can be involved. And so we want to make sure that you pick one up before you leave tonight. We'll have them available in the lobby before you exit, along with a gift. We have a gift for you, a little memento from tonight's celebration, so please don't forget that when you leave. And so as we go forward, I hope that we'll have more and more opportunities to talk about the ways in which God is now working in our midst. You know, in many ways, I feel like the last 15 years, as hard as they've been, and as much work as we've accomplished, have merely been preparatory. They've merely gotten us to the place where the real work begins. We had to turn the church around, we had to raise the money, we had to fix up the building, but that was all in order to prepare us for this moment. And therefore, I can't tell you how excited I am on this, the 200th anniversary of our church, to announce the launch of Resound. And it is my prayer that through Resound, we'll not only mark this moment in time, but together as a congregation, we will prepare for the next 200 years of gospel ministry in New York City. So thank you for being a part of this. And now I'm going to invite Howard Eddington to come up and say a prayer for us. But the meal's not over. So enjoy your time with one another. When you have finished your entree, we'd encourage you to cross the lobby back to the south room where we had cocktails, where we'll have dessert and an opportunity to continue to spend time with one another. But thank you for making an effort to be with us tonight. I think after 18 months of a pandemic, we were all ready for a party. And there was no better way to do it than this. So thank you for being a part of this very special night. And now let me hand it over to Howard to say a prayer for us.
It would be hard for me to explain to you the profound emotion that Trish and I feel. Having seen this church at its worst, and now seeing what God has done far beyond whatever we could have imagined. It's an incredible experience for the two of us to come back here to a place that we love. And I would simply say to you that my 57 years in the ministry, my time at Central and everything that's happened since is the capstone of my life in service to Jesus Christ. I would ask you to join me in prayer, please. God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, we bow before you in humble adoration, profoundly grateful for the miraculous work you have accomplished in this body of your people. I thank you for the experience we have had this evening as we walk down Park Avenue and listen to the resounding sound of those bells. As now we've begun to capture a vision where you are leading this congregation in the years that are ahead, resounding with the power of the gospel as few churches have ever experienced. Our Father, I remember that this great Christian faith of ours began in the supreme person of Jesus Christ in a couple of little out-of-the-way hamlets in Bethlehem and Nazareth. But then, by the power of your Holy Spirit, the church began to grow and spread to metropolises like Antioch and Alexandria and Ephesus and Corinth and Rome. And as the strategy unfolded, it became clear, O Lord, that it was your intent to plant the gospel in the great cities, and then through commerce and trade and all kinds of other factors, the gospel would spread to the countryside. And now here, all these years later, we see precisely the same thing happening, that here, Central, a beacon of faith and hope in Jesus Christ, right here in the midst of what may well be the greatest city in the world. And that gospel is going to resound forth in innumerable, incalculable ways, a ripple effect of the Spirit of God, spreading the great good news of Jesus Christ out into the countryside and the world around us. Thank you, O God, for the extraordinary courage and leadership of Jason Harris. And thank you for those individuals whom you have raised up to bless this congregation and to lead it. And thank you for those who sit on the pews and sing for joy to Jesus Christ, knowing that each one has a significant role to play in the future that you are now beginning to unfold before us. What a great way to celebrate 200 years, yes, but oh, to look forward to the next chapter in the life of this magnificent church, the great Central Church of New York City. I offer it all to you, O God, knowing that it belongs to Jesus Christ, and by his power, nothing is ever impossible. In the name of Jesus I pray. Amen and amen.